Hi guys, this may be a tall order, but this could be the worst lie told yet by Donald Trump or his administration. First, a quick bit of context. A Salvadorian man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia was deported to El Salvador by the Trump administration. They claim it was mistaken, but those seeking his return dispute that. He was living in the US legally under a withholding of removal status. Now, this was granted by a US judge in order to protect his life from gangs in El Salvador. Anyway, the US Supreme Court upheld the lower court's directive to force the Trump administration to return Garcia to America. The court voted 9-0, yes, 9-0 in favor of the lower court's decision. Now listen to Stephen Miller from the Trump administration relay this massive defeat to the president when he was speaking in the Oval Office.
I promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for it?
But the Supreme Court's asking to...
Is that
what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor?
In our favor, against...
No, it was not in your favor. What a massive lie. The Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, voted 9-0 to support a directive by a lower court. And that directive was for the Trump administration to go and bring this guy back from El Salvador. That was the ruling. And Stephen Miller, a member of Donald Trump's administration, telling the president, how is it possible that Donald Trump doesn't know this information? I know this information. How is it possible Donald Trump doesn't know it? That opens another can of worms. But they're literally lying here. The Supreme Court supported unanimously. 9-0. You have to remember that there are conservatives on this Supreme Court, a significant number of conservatives, every single one of them, even the most extreme ones, said you have to follow the directive of this lower court. And its directive is for the Trump administration to bring this guy back to the United States. They don't say how, you just have to do it. And you have Stephen Miller here saying, no, we won it. We truly live in the upside down. Now, this is extremely concerning. Really worrying, because the Trump administration now is ignoring the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is supposed to be a check on the power of the president. The Trump administration is ignoring it, is flipping it, saying, actually, we won this case. When you lost this case, you didn't even have one guy on your side.
The district court ruling saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time. No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it per the court can only be directed to him.
I asked...
I don't know what else to say. It's not our problem. Our Supreme Court is going to be ignored. We can ignore what Stephen Miller here is doing. He's trying to spin. He's trying to say, oh, it's nothing to do with us. It's to do with the government in El Salvador. No, you are not the Supreme Court. He's trying to convince people to ignore the ruling of the Supreme frigging Court. You know, I've heard Brexiteers and people on the right in Britain say, well, we don't need the European Court of Human Rights. We don't need a foreign court telling us what to do, trying to protect our human rights. We can trust in the government to protect our human rights. Look at what's happening in the United States. They don't have the European Court of Human Rights. Here you have Donald Trump ignoring human rights, ignoring the Supreme Court. I hope he's going to U-turn on this. But at the moment, Donald Trump doesn't know whether he's coming or going in this clip. And maybe he's just lying, pretending to be ignorant of this. But his administration is telling him and telling the public, no, we won this case. You lost this case. We're into uncharted territory here, guys. I've yet to see something like this. You know, this is not like politics. This is beyond politics. Because you're talking about human rights here. You're talking about the Constitution. You're talking about the Supreme Court. This is worse than Boris Johnson sending Jacob Rees-Mogg to lie to the Queen. I can't even fathom how damaging this is to the United States, because we've never been here before. How can anyone at this stage not look at Donald Trump and say, no, this guy is not, how can they look at him and say he's not a dictator? Like, this is what dictators do. They ignore the courts. Generally it's the lower courts. But Donald Trump, or at least for now anyway, his administration is ignoring the US Supreme Court. And I don't know where it goes from here.